Happy anniversary, everybody! Yes, we're nearly 1 month into the COVID-19 pandemic panic, so today I wanted to do something different on the show. Instead of just giving you a question and then hopefully having you give me your answers, I wanted to give you actual information and a conclusion on where we stand with the coronavirus and its data. That update? We still have no freaking clue what's going on, and anybody who thinks the data being used today is worth even meandering a guess from is silly. Look, I'm a data guy and I've always been that way. Whether it was simply knowing who held the most receiving records in the NFL way back in 1989, Don Hutson, thank you very much, or the rushing totals for the latest Packers or really any NFL draftee until today, where my day job literally has me analyzing data on a daily basis. So when I look to give you something solid around coronavirus and its numbers, I always look at the data. However, the deeper I dig, the less confident I become in anything coronavirus data related. Last Saturday, on the big show over at Mojo 50 Radio, I ran down the set of numbers from the IMHE. It's the standard the White House is using, but the predictions it's modeling versus reality have been way off by factors of 2x at the very least. Perhaps the most troubling is that most of the worst of it comes on a state-by-state prediction level, and I'm going to get into that in a bit. But the state of Virginia saw half of the predicted cases from the IMHE, and that was the best of the bunch by a country mile. Other states saw their predicted hospitalization totals miss by 10x or more. Given that outcome, I found myself wondering out loud on Saturday's Critical Thinking show, which is linked below and in the YouTube channel. How in the blue hell could this be possible, and why in the blue hell would the White House and its infectious disease people be relying on that kind of really off-base information? Thanks to the digging of Sean Davis over at The Federalist, you begin to see a picture that is very disturbing indeed. Something is way off when you predicted 121,000 hospitalization cases in the US on April 1, and only 1/4 of that number was actually reported. Davis daring to look into data modeling versus reality led to the IMHE backpedaling and revamping of its models to the point that I'm pretty sure Mel Kiper Jr. now has them as a first-round cornerback in his latest NFL mock draft. Today, we're told that, by the way, the modeling always is being updated with the best information and, all those different data sets. Okay, if that's true, let's actually test that theory. As of Monday, April 6th, the year of our Lord 2020, we were supposed to see 193,165 Americans hospitalized due to coronavirus. The real total, 27,069. Now, before you get on about, but Andrew, social distancing, the IMHE model already bakes that idea into the cake of its own modeling. So there goes that theory widely circulating on the left. What that tells me is the modeling, even if it is updating, is complete and total garbage, because you went from being 25% correct on your predictions April 1 to 5 days later just being 14% correct. Some would call that being less accurate, not more. How might this be happening is the real question, and its answers are not all that complicated, actually. You see, when you dig further than an inch below the surface and into the collection of the data, you realize something real quick. If it's garbage in, it's going to be garbage out. How dare I suggest the data is garbage, right, national media? Well, what you need to know first off is that no two sets of data coming into these models could ever be the same. That's another way of saying there's no standardization of input data. I'll get into the specifics of what this means in a second. But instead of recognizing that issue, the IMHE, which again is the modeling that our powers that be are relying on to keep us all sitting at home, apparently decided to just use the information from the New York or New Jersey area and apply it to the rest of the country. At least that was the case prior to April 2nd. As for the standardization of input data, it's a virtual impossibility here because we're dealing with 50 states and multitude of localities that all gather and report information in varying ways. What NYC may count as a death from coronavirus, Arizona or New Mexico or any other numbers of states wouldn't. This bit of knowledge is also about to become very important. You see, these models also appear to set their projections backwards. That's to say they look at the number of deaths and then work through the chain of events to ICU stays, hospitalization, and so on. Where did I get this bit of knowledge? By actually reading the modeling information and not just the results. It's really that simple. Instead of working their modeling from the numbers of hospitalizations, then to ICU, to ventilator, to death, they're doing it the other way around. And given how reporting of these numbers can vary so widely, there's no way to properly sync the data. It seems to me to be a fundamental flaw because in order to measure resource utilization, you need to understand what the baseline for cases really is, and then work from there first. Instead, they've apparently chosen the most widely variant starting point possible and then went backwards. Now, one would think that professional data modelers within virology and the scientific world in general would have maybe noticed these two big sets of problems and then thrown said models out of the mix until they could actually be, more than a quarter accurate. That's the first set of problems with the data. The second problem, well, it's actually something that I already pointed out, and that's that every state and municipality seem to be doing their reporting in different ways, thus making it virtually impossible to model on a national basis in any reliable way at all. One would think, okay, how about this? Let's just get granular instead and then get an understanding of how each locality or state or whomever is in charge of data reporting actually counts these things. Model on a state-by-state basis, then go nationally from there. This doesn't seem to be that hard to figure out. Yet, even when the IMHE modeled on a state-by-state basis, they were way the hell off by at least a factor of 2x like I mentioned before with Virginia, and in some cases off by as much as projecting over 50,000 cases in New York State and coming up with only a bit over 18,000 cases. And I could go on, and did on this past weekend's full show on Mojo 50 Radio, which you can also find on this channel, by the way. No matter what, I'd call that doing it all sorts of wrong. What I'm really struggling with here is how in the hell didn't the smartest of the smart set of people not figure out that anomaly and start to deliver their models on a state-by-state basis, again, with every state's input data taken into consideration separately? Surely, if the smartest data people out there can come up with an algorithm that will tell you what your next meal would be or where to park your car best in this exact moment, they could figure out an equation that maybe fits with the data that they would be given and takes into consideration how they actually report that data in the first place. I work with some incredibly smart data people, and I know they could do this. So that's why I'm really struggling with the stupidity and garbage of these models and what we're being asked to sacrifice based on these mistaken prognostications. Look, folks, this is not some gambling show on ESPN or FS1 where who cares if you lose some of that fake money on set every day. We're talking about lives and livelihoods here. It's literally life and death, and at the very least, we should be, expecting these people to be within a country damn mile of correct. I'm not suggesting that we've got one national policy that must be in place and followed either, because I believe each community or state is actually better equipped to know what works best for them. What I'm suggesting is that coroners, MEs, and all of those types of people are free to interpret the data to make death determinations how they might see fit. But we should at least have access to the baseline data going up the virology food chain, so to speak. The local pathologist or whomever likely does not have the time to waste getting into the weeds of data analysis on this type of a level, so pass it along and let others do the work for you. But it's clear that's not happening to a great enough degree here, if at all. We need at least standardization of the minimum data points that must be collected. I'm not seeing that happening at all here. I could be wrong, but I've done enough digging to not, actually see that taking place. And furthermore, I get that these data models can go off really only the inputs they're getting from the localities that are actually reporting. But how do we know if they are reporting broad sets of data or even allowing post-death testing to happen beyond their cause of death determination? In some states and localities, it is happening. In others, it's not, and it may not be the fault of the people in place. It may be down to the accessibility of the test or inaccuracy of the test to begin with, which brings up a whole different set of problems, not for this very show. So here's what I will say. Is it wise to listen to models whose predictions were so far off base, even given a second crack at getting in the general vicinity of correct? Hell no. Especially now with a national economy on the verge of collapse like we've never, ever seen in the era of capitalism. We've tried listening to their models and to their remedies, and nothing's adding up. It's time to focus less on the death tolls and more on how we begin to bring ourselves back to a functioning, working economy let alone the humming engine that it was before all of this happened. As for the data, folks, you gave it that old college try and you failed. For you, it's time to regroup and figure out a more reliable stream of information to input into your models and test them not under the bright lights of TV cameras, but in the darkness of your server rooms. And maybe next time, because there's going to be a next time and likely soon with coronavirus, maybe next time you'll have things set up in a better way. As the debate over death tolls spiking in curves and all of that wonderful goodness continues to rage on, just please remember, not a single one of those experts talking into your television set is actually saying anything that they could possibly be confident in if they're quoting these types of models to you. But don't worry, our institutions will just continue to go unchecked. The media will continue to do China's bidding. They'll continue to trust in what the corrupted WHO tells us, despite it being really pretty easy to connect the dots of control over that organization by China, that even I could do it just by a simple Google search. They won't bother to be skeptical over the numbers presented or make those people explain why they got it oh so wrong when they inevitably do it again. They won't bother to then report those critical pieces of knowledge to the rest of the nation either. They won't dare to ask, wait, how many times do you have to be wrong or revise your modeling because you were off by factors of 4x and more before we stop listening to what you're saying, by the way, American people? That's just our media institution. Our political class is even worse because we've borne the brunt of their stupid decisions and they're just doubling down instead of taking a step back. We can't trust the politicians because we're seeing people like the governor of my horrible state, Illinois, wonderful J.B. Pritzker, making this all about finding a way up the ladder of power within his own party and becoming the next presidential frontrunner in 2024 or 2028. We're seeing people like Gavin Newsom praise Trump to get what he wants and then contradict a statement made by the president about reopening stadiums by the fall, all to set himself up to look like the reasonable man in the crowd of socialists. Just don't tell them I'm actually a socialist crowd. Never mind the fact that his state is so in crisis that he's got extra ventilators that could magically be spread to other states with more need. And by the way, even the stockpile we currently have nationally isn't being used to the degree that, wait for it, the modeling suggested it was going to be. What was the title of my show on Saturday? Assume you're being lied to? That's right. Folks, that rings more true today as we go down that rabbit hole of data even more. Assume you're being lied to. And if they can prove you wrong, great, listen to them. But sadly, we have to assume the worst of our institutions because they can't even be trusted to simply come out and say, we don't know. We don't know. Sometimes the wisest thing to say is indeed, I don't know, and then seek out the best possible information. Now, if you find that information unreliable or flawed in a major way, you continue to seek out better information. You don't play pin the tail on the donkey with 350 million lives and livelihoods. Guess what, President Fauci and Trump? I have more faith in the American people to say, okay, why don't you know? Then they listen to that explanation and do their part to unify the data so we can make truly informed decisions as a country. It's simply mind-boggling that in a world in which Google is offering to snitch on your every movement in these lockdown stay-at-home order times to governments across the fruited plains, that these same data people can't unify this kind of data. If Google, Twitter, and Apple can figure out how far, how often you traveled from home and for how long, they can get their people to pitch in and get a unified data set to report on for infectious disease. Come on. Either this is just an indictment on how smart our scientists are, or it's an indictment on how little they think of us to present us with this kind of garbage and expect us to just take it lying down. So please keep this data problem in the back of your mind, in front of your tongue, when your family and friends want to tout the death tolls or anything else related to the numbers surrounding coronavirus. Again, take this virus seriously, just like you should take all potential viruses seriously. But please at least stay informed, ask questions, and never give up your liberties, even temporarily, based off of bad data. Oh, and for the love of all things holy, get you some Corona, the beer, before that goes out of stock because, they've stopped production. But don't forget, you can find my show Critical Thinking every Saturday at 5 p.m. Central Time on Mojo 50 Radio and the Mojo 50 Radio Facebook page. Until our next time together on Thursday, Matthew, 544.